Chapter 21. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Ning Qing, I don't have time to wait for you. Ning Qing could not hide her surprise. He wants me to go. Yes. Lu Jue went forward and placed the gift box on the table. With a glance, he knew that it was an expensive luxury brand. You can take some time to dress up. I'll pick you up tonight. He wanted to leave, but he was stopped by Ning Qing. Emotion surged in her eyes as she said coldly, "What does he mean?" Noticing Ning Qing's suspicious gaze, Lu Jue explained, "Young madam, don't misunderstand. It's indeed a special occasion today and I need you to attend." Seeing the guard on Ning Qing's face fade, Lu Jue nodded and turned to leave. Ning Qing did not understand. After she and Nian Lai parted on bad terms a few days ago, his and Bai Yang's scandal had become very heated. He had even heard her admit to their relationship. Was he bringing her to the gathering to embarrass her? She pursed her lips and reached out to open the box's lid. Her puzzled gaze landed on the long dress. The pure white muslin dress was folded neatly. There were some diamonds on her chest, decorating her upper body perfectly. It was not tacky and even looked pure and elegant. Her fair fingertips caressed the material. It was soft and smooth. A hint of surprise flashed across Ning Qing's eyes. Then, she thought of something and her expression suddenly became sarcastic. Wasn't this Ning Su's style in the photo? Her lips curled up weakly and she instantly lost all interest. However, Ning Qing knew better than anyone that Nian Lai would not let her do as she pleased. Therefore, in the afternoon, she still dressed up. She took a shower and hair, put on some light makeup, and waited for Lu Jue to pick her up. At 6 o'clock sharp. Lu Jue came. He stood at the bottom of the stairs and listened to the footsteps above. He asked, "Young madam, are you ready?" The sound of high heels hitting the ground was light and heavy. Lu Jue frowned and looked up. Ning Qing was wearing a long, black shoulderless dress. The dress was short in front and long behind, revealing her slender calves. She was wearing black high heels. Her hair, which had just passed her shoulders, was coiled into a bun. A lock of hair hung by her face, and her red lips were fiery. Her waist was slender, and her figure swayed. Lu Jue had followed Nian Lai for many years and had seen more women than carps crossing the river. However, he was still stunned by her. Ning Qing was undoubtedly beautiful. Furthermore, she was breathtakingly beautiful. There was no need for too many embellishments, as she could make a person look at her for 10,000 years. Especially her bright eyes. The ends of her eyes were raised and looked a little similar to those of a fox. When she glanced at you gently, you would feel as if your entire body was electrified. It was a myriad of emotions. Her slender fingers were on the handrail of the corridor. When she passed by Lu Jue, he grunted in response. Lu Jue then returned to his senses and quickly lowered his head. "The car is already waiting outside." "Yes." Ning Qing did not stop and walked straight out. The sun had just set and orange light covered the ground. Lu Jue followed after her. "Young madam, that's..." Before he could finish, Ning Qing had already opened the door. In the car, the man's handsome face was carved like a blade and his figure was slender. He was wearing a black suit with a bow tie of the same color, looking calm and reserved. Hearing this, Nian Lai turned his head and saw Ning Qing's slightly surprised expression. His dark eyes sized her up, and his handsome brows were locked tightly. "What are you wearing?" Ning Qing's hand was still holding the car door as she looked at him coldly. "Isn't it obvious enough? A gown." Nian Lai clenched his fists. That exposed shoulder stimulated his senses. Ning Qing could see that he was dissatisfied. "If you don't like it, I won't go, get in." Nian Lai's eyes were clearly dyed with a stern expression, but his actions were the opposite of his emotions. He moved aside. When he turned around and saw that Ning Qing was standing still, his expression darkened. Ning Qing, I don't have time to wait for you. Ning Qing's plan fell through. She could only listen to him and get into the car. Chapter 22. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ning Qing, no matter what, don't mess around tonight. 20 minutes later, the car stopped outside the venue. Looking at the long red carpet outside and the luxuriously dressed men and women getting out of the luxurious car, Ning Qing's palms were sweating. This was the first time she would face the public after she woke up. Lu Zhui said, "Young master, young madam, we're here." Ning Qing's hands gripped her skirt tightly. She was extremely nervous and helpless. Lu Zhui received Nian Lai's signal and opened the door to get out of the car. Ning Qing looked at the man beside her. His face was blurry in the dark car. Nian Lai looked at her and a cold smile appeared on his lips. "I didn't expect you to be nervous too." Ning Qing straightened her back. No, he lit a cigarette. White smoke filled the air, and Ning Qing, who did not like the smell of smoke, could not help but cough. At this moment, Nian Lai's deep voice was heard. "The people who will be attending tonight's meeting are all of high status and power in Yen City. Our performance represents the entire Nian family. No mistakes can be made." Ning Qing's neck stiffened. So. Through the smoke, Nian Lai looked at the woman under the light. Her skin was white and her lips were red. She was especially attractive. His eyes were deep and he puffed out smoke rings from his lips. After touching the roof of the car, they scattered. "So, Ning Qing, no matter what, don't mess around tonight. Whatever I say, and whatever you do, don't make me unhappy." Ning Qing's gaze froze. She turned to look at him. In the darkness, his face was clear and his expression was cold, like a god that could decide life and death. She bit her lip and nodded. At the door, the people entering and exiting roped in each other and chatted happily. Lu Zhui opened the car door for her. She lifted her skirt and prepared to follow him into the venue, but she was blocked by Nian Lai. He looked down at her and, in her confusion, reached out and took her hand. Ning Qing was stunned and blurted out, "Nian Lai." He looked ahead and did not look at her. The two words came from his mouth calmly. Only she could hear him. "Be good." Ning Qing's heart jumped violently. He had already placed his hand on hers. With a calm and dignified gentlemanly demeanor, his lips curled into a smile that matched the situation. Ning Qing followed his footsteps carefully. Someone greeted Nian Lai. He nodded and caught a glimpse of Ning Qing's tense face. He turned his head and leaned close to her ear to remind her threateningly, "Smile." Ning Qing stiffened and smiled. They entered the magnificent hall. Under the bright lights, people came and went, drinking and chatting. A few people noticed Nian Lai and Ning Qing's arrival and surrounded them with bright eyes. "Hey, young Master Nian. Nice to meet you. This must be your wife. She's really more beautiful than a flower." The man turned to Ning Qing. He looked at her with incomparable amazement in his eyes and reached out. No wonder Madame Nian did not show her face in the past. It's because she's too beautiful. Young Master Nian couldn't bear to let us see her. Ning Qing's entire body was stiff. Faced with such a greeting, she could not react at all. The man was puzzled as well. "Madame Nian." Her other hand reached over and shook his hand. Nian Lai's handsome face was calm. "She's throwing a tantrum with me." His words resolved the awkwardness between them. The man had an expression that said he understood. He began to make conversation with Nian Lai. After these people left, batch after batch of people came up. Ning Qing smiled until her face was stiff and her waist ached. Then, she finally heard Nian Lai's words. He whispered to her, his tone gentle. "Don't run around. I'll get Nian Che to look for you later." Ning Qing smiled stiffly and replied cooperatively, okay. When he left with the others, she lowered her lips and walked to an empty corner. She lowered her body and hit her aching calves. A few shadows covered her head. Ning Qing paused. A sharp female voice was heard. Your legs are so sore after dealing with so few people. Are you a cripple? Chapter 23. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I hope you have such a backbone. In front of President Nian and that actress Ning Qing straightened her body slowly. She did not know the three women in front of her. She was unfazed. Her eyes were cold and clear. Can I help you? Girl A smiled and said, what could be wrong? We just want to see what young Master Nian's wife, who has been hiding for so many years, looks like. Girl B sized Ning Qing up from head to toe. Her beautiful face was filled with jealousy. She said in a strange voice, what do you mean by hiding for a few years? She's just a useless person with an impaired body. She laid on the bed for a few years and gained the sympathy of young Master Nian. The short-haired woman, who was also the one who had started talking to Ning Qing, smiled and mocked, what are you talking about? Miss Ning is not the kind of person you think she is, she just can't figure out her identity and insists on taking the position of young madam of the Nian family. The woman looked at Ning Qing's expressionless face and said maliciously, I heard that she's a murderer. Ning Qing clenched her fists and stared at her. Girl A, no way. President Nian will marry a murderer. Girl B said affirmatively, look, she doesn't even argue with that. She must be feeling guilty because we got it right. Girl A, that's too disgusting. Who is she? She actually killed someone. Who did she kill? Ning Qing pursed her red lips tightly. The blood on her face had drained at some point. The emotions in her heart surged like waves. Pain spread as if it wanted to crush her rationality. The short-haired woman said slowly, deliberately tormenting Ning Qing's nerves. It's her, have you said enough? Ning Qing interrupted their conversation coldly. Of course not. The three women raised their heads proudly with disdain and disgust for her. Don't you know your status? You seduced young Master Nian. Have you forgotten who you are? Ning Qing pursed her lips and opened her eyes, looking a little seductive. How could I forget who I am? I'm just a child from an ordinary family. I wasn't pampered since I was young. In your eyes, I'm naturally not worthy of your idol. Girl B sneered. If you know that you're not good enough, hurry up and pack your things and get lost from the Nian family. Ning Qing picked up a glass of champagne on the table and covered her red lips with the rim of the glass. Her eyes were glittering as she smiled gently. What if I don't? The short-haired woman had a look of disdain. Ning Qing, have some self-awareness. Do you think young Master Nian will like you for long because of your foxy face? I don't know how long he'll like me. Ning Qing took 2 steps forward. A lock of hair blocked her eyes, making her look even more charming. His bright eyes were filled with coldness. The three women could not help but retreat. Ning Qing's cold gaze searched their faces before she suddenly whispered, but he didn't take a liking to you because of your looks. This means that I can enter his eyes, but you can't. Girl A was frightened by her cold aura. She pulled the other 2 people back in fear. However, she could not take this lying down and scolded Ning Qing, you're indeed raised by a cheap family. You have no manners at all. Ning Qing was not to be outdone. She retorted coldly, you keep calling me cheap. You're really well-mannered. This cold mockery made the other party anxious. She grabbed a cup of wine and was about to splash it on her. The short-haired woman reached out to stop her and motioned to the left. Not far away, Nian Che was searching for someone in the crowd. When he looked over, he walked straight over. The women glared at Ning Qing angrily. The short-haired woman was indignant and sneered. It's fine that you're so noble in front of us sisters. I just hope that you can be so bold when you're facing young Master Nian and that actress. Chapter 24. You are listening at novelfull.audio. She was simply wasting Brother Lai's heart. The three of them turned and walked away. Nian Che rushed to her. Little sister. Law, I finally found you. Ning Qing's grip on the wine glass relaxed. She glanced at the person and did not speak. Nian Che lowered his body and looked at her beautiful face. He was a little worried despite being stunned. Sister. Law, why is your face so pale? Are you feeling unwell? Ning Qing avoided him and put down the wine glass. It's nothing. Don't stand on ceremony with me. We're family. Nian Che's handsome brows furrowed tightly, his concern was evident. If you really encounter something, tell me. Otherwise, if my brother finds out, he'll think that I didn't take good care of you. Everyone around him knew how Nian Lai treated her. Did Nian Che really not know, or was he pretending not to know? Ning Qing looked at him for a long time. Other than seriousness, there was really no trace of disguise on the man's face. She lowered her eyes, her face expressionless. I'm really fine. Sister. Law, she said she's fine. Don't use your hot face to stick to her cold ass. Su Inua, who was wearing a pink dress, jumped out of nowhere and mocked him sarcastically. When Nian Che saw Su Inua, he felt uncomfortable. He had never liked this woman since he was young. She followed behind his brother all day and shouted that she wanted to marry him. If he had not gone overseas and heard her howl for another 2 years, he would have had a heart attack. Nian Che despised her. What does my concern for my sister. Law have to do with you? Go away. Su Inua choked on his words and said unhappily, the venue is so big. I can go wherever I want. Then please find a corner to bury yourself in to prevent yourself from coming out to disgust others. Su Inua was furious. Nian Che, can you be more gentlemanly? Must you go against me? Nian Che said disdainfully, a gentleman is good to good people, but you're not. Su Inua gritted her teeth in hatred. She had not won against him since she was young. Her furious gaze moved from that handsome face to Ning Qing. She smiled coldly and mocked her relentlessly. Sister is really awesome. You can even do such a thing as hiding behind others. Ning Qing's gaze darkened. Her red lips moved, but Nian Che's figure blocked her. She was stunned. The man's broad shoulders were in front of her. Nian Che raised his chin, his eyes filled with arrogance and disdain. Su Inua, if you're jealous, so be it. Don't put your anger on my sister. Law. The woman's eyes widened as if she had heard something ridiculous. I'm jealous of her. She pointed at Ning Qing and found it funny. What's there to be jealous of about her? There was a hint of pride in Nian Che's voice. She's my sister. Law. Su Inua sneered. Don't you know if she's worthy of Brother Lai? If she's not worthy, are you? Su Inua felt frustrated. She clenched her fists. Nian Che, you're the only one in the Nian family who acknowledges her. Uncle and Auntie Nian don't care about her at all. Nian Che gave a fake smile. It doesn't matter if they take her seriously or not, Su Inua refused to let go of this. When Uncle and Auntie heard that Brother Lai was going to bring her here, they left early. Doesn't this mean anything? Noel. She listened to the two of them argue. Her initial surprise slowly calmed down and was replaced with confusion. She was a little shocked that Nian Che had stood up for her. But did his parents not like her? Ning Qing looked past the man's shoulder and saw the flustered Su Inua. The other party was staring at her fiercely. He said indignantly and hatefully, besides, it's a waste of Brother Lai's consideration for her to dress like this. Consideration. Ning Qing frowned. What do you mean? Before she could answer, a hand wrapped around her waist. Ning Qing's body froze. The heat spread from her waist to her entire back. Warm breaths sprayed behind her ears. She instantly did not dare to move again, and a deep voice exploded in her ears. What are you talking about? Chapter 25. You are listening at novelfull.audio. No, I'll teach them a lesson for you, Brother Lai. Nian Che turned around and shouted happily, Brother, you're here. Ning Qing then confirmed that the person hugging her was really Nian Lai. Faced with these two people, he only hummed in greetings and lowered his head to bury it beside Ning Qing's face. His dark eyes were filled with gentleness. Why are you pulling your face? Are you unhappy? To Ning Qing, this voice was like a summon from hell, making her hair stand on end. When she did not answer, Nian Lai was not angry either. He looked up and glanced at Su Yinhua and Nian Che before asking softly, did the two of them make you angry? Be good. Don't be angry. I'll teach them a lesson for you. Ignoring the stiffness of the woman in his arms, Nian Lai straightened his upper body. His hand was still wrapped around her slender waist, but the gentleness was no longer there. His expression was cold and ruthless. When that cold gaze swept over, Nian Che raised his hands in surrender. Brother, I didn't do anything. It's all her fault. She was the one who wanted to bully little sister. Law. Nian Che pointed at Su Yinhua. His cold eyes moved to her. Su Yinhua's face turned pale. Brother Lai, I didn't, of course, you did. Don't think I didn't see it. When I came over earlier, 3 women had spoken to sister. Law. They were clearly with you before this. Su Yinhua's face was pale. Her pink lips parted slightly. I didn't. Nian Che, stop talking nonsense. She turned to look at Nian Lai. Her tender and delicate face was frowning and she looked very aggrieved. Brother Lai, it's really not me. Believe me. Nian Lai pursed his thin lips tightly. Even if he did not speak, his king-like aura was so cold that it made everyone present feel a chill. There was a faint coldness between his brows, and his tone was extremely low. His hands tightened around Ning Qing, trapping her in his arms. What do you want to do with her, huh? He asked her. Ning Qing's fists clenched. He gave her the right to choose as if he really loved her deeply and pampered her to the extreme. Ning Qing thought that fortunately, it was her. Otherwise, which woman could resist such bewitching words? Nian Che let out a cry and covered his face as he screamed, stop showing off, stop showing off. You're making us miserable. Looking at their intimacy, Su Yinhua's lips trembled. She was still considered obedient in his arms. A rare smile appeared on her cold face. Up to you. Suddenly, the woman broke free from his shackles. The arc fell. Ning Qing lowered her head. Her face was pale as she said, I'm not feeling well. I'll go back first. She turned around, lifted her skirt, and rushed out as if she was escaping. Nian Che sighed a few times and did not manage to stop her in time. He turned around and looked at the man beside him. Brother, sister. Law. His words stopped abruptly. This was because he had noticed the dark waves surging in Nian Lai's eyes. After a long time, the coldness on the man faded and he returned to his calm state. Nian Che. Nian Che glanced at him and said slowly, send your sister. Law home. Nian Che nodded as if he had been granted amnesty. In the end, he looked at Su Yinhua seriously and chased after Ning Qing. In this corner, only Nian Lai and Su Yinhua were left. Su Yinhua's lips trembled. When her gaze touched Nian Lai, she lowered it gently. Yinhua. Her body trembled suddenly. She looked up and forced a smile. Brother Lai, I didn't do that kind of thing. You believe me, right? Nian Lai strode over to her. He lowered his head and approached. Su Inua's heart was pounding, and her eyes were blurry. Brother Lai, the man's eyes were deep, dark, and calm. They were like the endless night sky and the bottomless sea. In his eyes, there was no light at all. You're not suitable for lying. Su Inua woke up immediately. She stammered as her tears glistened. Don't do those meaningless things again. He passed by her and did not stop for a moment. Chapter 26. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Miss Ning, Madam invites you to the old residence to meet outside the hotel. Nian Che drove and searched for Ning Qing along the way. Fortunately, he did not drive far before he saw Ning Qing. He stopped the car by the roadside and chased after her. Sister.in.law Ning Qing was in a daze when someone suddenly patted her shoulder, scaring her so much that she almost fell. Nian Che quickly grabbed her wrist and said with a smile, "Little sister.in.law, you're a little scary." "What's wrong?" Ning Qing's face was cold. Under the dim yellow light of the street lamps, her exquisite facial features were vivid. Her red lips were pursed tightly, looking charming. She shook off his hand. "Don't follow me." Nian Che was stunned for a second. "My brother asked me to pick you up, don't mention him to me." There was no one around. With this roar, the surroundings became even more silent. Ning Qing's chest rose and fell heavily. Her breathing was heavy, and the emotions in her chest were a mess. Nian Che stood in front of her and stopped talking. After a long time, the anger and trembling in her heart stopped. Ning Qing slowed down and looked up at him. "I'm sorry, I'm not in a good mood." "It's okay." Nian Che smiled gently. "Are you done being angry? If you are, I'll send you home. It's late. It's very dangerous for a girl to be outside alone." This was beyond Ning Qing's expectations. As the second young master of the Nian family, he should have some temper. However, not only was he not angry at her, but he was also thinking for her. Ning Qing blinked and agreed apologetically. "Okay. Then let's go." Nian Che turned around and walked toward the car. Ning Qing hesitated for a moment and followed him. After getting into the car, the two of them did not speak again. The lights rustled as shadows flashed past the car window. The car was extremely quiet. Ning Qing leaned against the car door, her gaze falling as her thoughts fluctuated. Soon, the car stopped. Nian Che's gaze caught her in a daze in the rearview mirror. The woman's side profile was graceful, and she looked dazed and fragile. He hesitated. Sister.in.law Ning Qing woke up with a start. Her eyes rippled like a frightened deer in the forest, untainted by the mortal world and dust. He could not say any comforting words. He only said, "We're here." Ning Qing nodded and got out of the car. There was a knock on the car window. Nian Lai lowered his head and stuck his head out slightly. Ning Qing said seriously, "Thank you, Nian Che." He tilted his head and smiled. "You're my sister.in.law. You don't have to thank me for such a small matter. Go in. I still have to go back to report." Ning Qing nodded. As he watched the woman walk into the manor and no longer see her, Nian Che sighed softly. He started the car and drove away from Yunjing No. 1. Ning Qing returned to her room. She was exhausted and did not think too much about it. After washing up, she lay on the bed and fell asleep. For the entire night, she did not hear the car switch off downstairs. The next morning, when Ning Qing went downstairs, she looked at Nian Lai's room. The door was closed. Indeed, he did not come back last night. She went to the kitchen expressionlessly and made breakfast. Just as she finished eating, she heard the sound of a car outside. Ning Qing grabbed a tissue and wiped her mouth and hands clean. However, the person who came in was not who she thought he was. A man in his 40s walked in. When he saw Ning Qing at the dining table, he nodded slightly. Miss Ning. Ning Qing looked him up and down. He was wearing a suit and a bow tie. He was tall and straight, and it was obvious that he had undergone good training. She narrowed her eyes and asked, "You are?" The man's expression was serious. "I'm from the old residence. You can call me Uncle Lu." Ning Qing stood up. Her thoughts were in turmoil as she asked the man for his purpose in coming. "Uncle Lu, what are you looking for me for?" Butler Lu's tone did not change. "Madam invites you to the old residence to meet her." Chapter 27. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You're Qing Qing, right? You're really good looking. Nian Lai's parents wanted her to go to the old residence. Ning Qing did not understand their intentions, but when she reacted, she was already sitting in the car going to the old residence. On the way, Ning Qing felt uneasy. When she arrived at the old residence of the Nian family, she looked at the ancient-looking traditional house and smelled the scent of incense floating in the air. Her nerves were tightly strung. Butler Lu led her around the courtyard for a long time and finally arrived at a pavilion. Far away, Ning Qing saw the figure sitting by the table. Butler Lu stopped in his tracks and said respectfully, "Madam, Miss Ning is here." Ning Qing did not speak. Butler Lu reached out and guided her up the stairs. Ning Qing went forward and stared at the slender woman. She was wearing an ankle-length black cheongsam. Her waist was like a weak willow branch that was supported by the wind. Her dark and beautiful hair was tied into a bun behind her head, and a top-grade jade hairpin was stuck in her hair. Her posture was delicate, dignified, and generous. Coincidentally, the woman turned around. She had thin eyebrows and curved eyes. Her well-maintained face revealed no signs of her age. Ning Qing was stunned. She clearly looked like a woman in her 20s or early 30s. When Mother Nian saw her, her eyes lit up. She came over and held her hand. "Oh, you're Qing Qing, right? My son has good taste. You're really good looking. Hurry, come and sit down." She was full of smiles as she pulled the stiff Ning Qing to a seat. She turned around and said to Uncle Lu, "Old Lu, get the kitchen to send the cooked bird's nest over to nourish Qing Qing's body." Butler Lu lowered his body. "Yes." Then he moved away. Mother Nian could not stop smiling. However, even as she smiled, she did not show her teeth and was very generous. She was an undefeated beauty. She saw it on Nian Lai's mother. Ning Qing remained silent. Mother Nian asked gently, "Why aren't you saying anything? Did I scare you?" Ning Qing looked at her hand and shook her head. "No, that's good." A gentle expression appeared on Mother Nian's face as she looked at her from head to toe. Her thin and long eyebrows were locked together gently. "You're just too thin. You're so thin. How can you be healthy?" This concern was caught off guard. Ning Qing was a little helpless. From the moment she woke up, for some reason, she hated it when others touched her. At this moment it was obvious that Mother Nian was unwilling to let go of her hand. However, there was no reason for her to retract her hand. It was because she felt a little of her warmth and love from her. "You have to eat more when the bird's nest is sent over later. Take the rest with you when you go back. Rest well, okay?" Ning Qing nodded obediently. "Okay." Mother Nian smiled and patted her hand. "You went to the banquet last night, right?" Sigh, it's all Liar's father's fault. He suddenly felt unwell, so we came back early. It's a pity I didn't see you. Ning Qing smiled. "It's okay. How is father now? Is he better?" Her smile did not change. Her gaze was gentle and beautiful, looking very sincere. "Don't worry. Your uncle is already fine. He went to the company this morning." This title made Ning Qing's heart ache. Then, he looked at Mother Nian. The initial smile on her warm and beautiful face remained as if she did not notice that she had said something wrong. Ning Qing shook off the excess thoughts and lowered her head. That's good. There was a short silence between the two of them. Coincidentally, the bird's nest was served. Mother Nian let go of Ning Qing's hand and handed her a porcelain bowl. Qing, try it. Ning Qing took it and took a sip under her gentle gaze. It was slightly sweet and melted in her mouth. Mother Nian smiled and asked, "How is it?" "It's delicious. I'm glad you like it. Hey, let me see who these two beauties are." Chapter 28. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Can you divorce liar? A cold male voice interrupted. Ning Qing lowered her head and stopped in her tracks. Nian Che had already walked up to the two of them. He placed his hands behind her back and leaned against the table. His tall nose twitched. "I knew it. I heard you asking me to cook bird's nest early in the morning. So it's because sister.in.law is coming." Nian Lai teased Ning Qing. He turned around and looked at his mother. "Mom, if you want to see your daughter.in.law, you should have said so earlier. I could have just brought sister.in.law back for you to see last night." "Chair, don't talk nonsense." Mother Nian looked back at her. "Chair is young and not like his brother. He doesn't know how to control his words. Don't mind him." Ning Qing did not know if she was hallucinating, but the woman who was still friendly at first seemed to have become much tougher. Ning Qing's heart turned cold. At the side, Nian Che pursed his lips and mumbled, "It's true. Why did you have to go through so much trouble, Nian Che?" Mother Nian called out his name again. Nian Che looked over unhappily, his gentle facial features turning serious. "I have something to discuss with Qing. Go back to your room first." Before anyone could react, the warm atmosphere turned sour. When Nian Che did not move, Mother Nian ordered Butler Lu, who was standing by the side, "Old Lu, send second young master back to his room." Ning Qing held the porcelain bowl and looked at Nian Che. He was very helpless. He looked at her worriedly and was forced to leave. Ning Qing pursed her lips. The fragrance in her mouth suddenly lost its flavor. At this moment, Mother Nian turned around and smiled calmly. Qing, I asked you to come over today because I have something to discuss with you." Ning Qing put down the bowl. Her eyes were bright, but they were calm. "What do you want to talk about? Can you divorce liar?" The spacious garden fell silent. Even the air froze for a few seconds. Mother Nian was still smiling. Her tone was gentle and contained power. "It's like this. I know that you didn't marry liar because you wanted to. You don't have any feelings for him either. Liar is unsociable and doesn't fit into the crowd. It's really unfair for a gentle girl like you to be with him. You're both still young. There are many more options after the divorce. You can find someone you really like and live happily ever after." The woman who was willing to agree with her earlier was silent now. Mother Nian extended her hand. Qing, do you think Auntie is right?" She wanted to shake Ning Qing's hand, but Ning Qing suddenly retracted it. As the movement was too big, she knocked over the bowl filled with bird's nest. The green porcelain bowl fell to the table and shattered especially suddenly. Mother Nian's expression did not look good. Qing, she doesn't want to." Mother Nian was stunned. Nian Lai had arrived at some point in time. His face was cold as he stood in front of the two of them. Ning Qing's hands on her lap clenched tightly. The next second, her hand was grabbed. She looked up in surprise. His face was close to hers, and his thick eyelashes covered his eyes. They were slightly dark. Nian Lai pulled her up and his mother hurriedly stood up. "Liar, what are you doing?" Nian Lai's obscure gaze landed on her. Even Ning Qing knew that his mood at this moment was definitely not joyful. Mother Nian maintained her smile. I know that there are some things you can't say. Therefore, I specially brought Qing Qing over today. I've said some things for you. The grip on his hand tightened suddenly. Ning Qing saw a thin layer of ice on his handsome face and his restrained anger appeared from his clenched jaw. When is it anyone else's turn to make decisions about me and her? Chapter 29. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Divorce or not, it doesn't count to anyone. Mother Nian's smile froze as she curled her fingers on the table. I don't want to be your decision maker. I just feel that when you married Qing Qing, she didn't know it herself. Now that she's awake, she should have the right to choose between you and not be with you. I didn't know my mother would be so kind as to care if others had the right to choose. When the cold mockery fell, her smile was no longer as bright. Her smile seemed to be just polite to maintain her gentle and warm persona. She reminded him calmly, liar, I'm your mother. The corner of her lips lifted slightly as the cold aura around her became stronger. You should be thankful that you're still my mother. Mother Nian's smile finally disappeared. The gentle facade faded away. That simple and elegant face revealed indifference and dignity. Nian Lai, you know you should divorce her. What do you mean by should? Mother Nian blew out a chaotic breath and said pompously, she has been married to you for 2 years. Ignoring the fact that you two didn't have any feelings for each other in the past, it has already been more than 3 months since she woke up. The two of you are still on thin ice and can't be reconciled. In that case, separating is the best choice for you two. When he heard this, a ruthlessness that could not be ignored appeared in Nian Lai's smiling eyes. He implied, you guys still like to play such tricks. Mother Nian knew her son well. His thoughts were abnormally sensitive and meticulous. She was not surprised at all that he knew that they had found someone to monitor him and Ning Qing. She raised her chin and said firmly, we're doing this for your own good. Nian Lai's thin lips curled up as his gaze swept across the surroundings. The simple pavilion could not hide anyone. He asked, when I asked you to come this time, where is he hiding to see the results? Mother Nian raised her voice, her intentions obviously to protect him. He's your father. Nian Lai was not afraid of her anger at all. His sharp eyes were cold. Let me guess. Is he there? In the pavilion diagonally ahead, the redwood carved window on the second floor was tightly closed, but it was the best place to look down. When he lowered his head, he could see the entire manor. His eyes seemed to be looking through the window into the stern and heartless eyes inside. Ning Qing looked in his direction, her heart thumping. His father was there. Didn't he say he wasn't around? Ning Qing instantly understood something and her heart turned cold. It turned out that his mother had other motives from the beginning. She retracted her gaze and looked at the dignified woman in front of her with her clear and cold eyes. Mother Nian guessed what she was thinking. Her gaze flickered imperceptibly before she changed the topic. This is what I mean. Don't always judge your father with bad intentions. Then why are you guessing my thoughts? Mother Nian's moist lips moved. Nian Lai's expression was solemn. His eyes were indifferent, but they also seemed to be surging. It doesn't matter to anyone if we get a divorce or not. Other than me. As soon as he finished speaking, he held Ning Qing's hand tightly and walked away. From afar, Mother Nian's words were exceptionally clear. You know that's unfair to her. The man did not pause and did not even turn back. In the pavilion alone, a beautiful woman stood there. On the stone table, there was some steam coming from the pot. Butler Lu went forward. Madam, young master, and Miss Ning have left. Anger appeared on the woman's face. With a wave of her slender hand, the porcelain pot holding the expensive bird's nest fell out and exploded. The water splashed onto the black dress and quickly disappeared. Butler Lu looked a little afraid. Madam, don't be angry. The skin on Mother Nian's hand was firm and smooth. She lowered her head and dusted off her wet dress. She frowned slightly as if she was angry because of this. She looked at the end of the shortcut in the garden and saw that the two of them were no longer there. She restrained her expression and waved at Butler Lu. "Get someone to clean it up." Butler Lu lowered his eyes. "Yes." Chapter 30. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You don't have to act so noble. On the other end, Ning Qin was pulled out of the old residence by Nian Lai. The man's footsteps were fast and anxious. She staggered and could not catch up to him in his anger. "Nian Lai. Nian Lai, let go of me." He was so strong that she could not shake him off. As soon as she reached the car, the world spun around her, and Ning Qin was pressed against the car door. Nian Lai lowered his head and leaned closer. He interrogated her ruthlessly. "Who asked you to see her?" Ning Qin felt that his question was ridiculous. "She was the one who asked someone to pick me up. I had no chance to reject her." His dark eyes narrowed slightly. "Was there no chance, or did you not want to reject it at all?" Ning Qin frowned. As she looked at the face that questioned her, she felt a little helpless. In his eyes, no matter if it was right or wrong, she was the one who was in the wrong. She actually wanted to explain something to him. Ning Qin's lips twitched as her face turned cold. "Whatever you think." This attitude aroused Nian Lai's discomfort and disgust. "You don't have to act so aloof. A woman who wants to divorce me every day went to see my mother. It can't be to develop feelings for her as her mother. In law." There was anger in Nian Lai's eyes, and coldness poured from his lips. The mockery made Ning Qin's heart turn cold. Her expression was too cold. At that moment, he hated her cold and indifferent look. He grabbed her chin forcefully and forced her to look into his eyes. "Ning Qin, when my mother asked for a divorce earlier, do you dare say that you weren't tempted?" Nian Lai saw Ning Qin's momentary daze. Coldness surrounded him. His long eyes shone with coldness, and his handsome facial features were filled with a dark gaze. He smirked and waved her away. Ning Qin was careless and tripped, falling to the ground. The wound on her knee that had not healed completely hurt. She touched it and heard the door close. In the car, a man's cold voice sounded. "Back to the company." "But young madam," the man closed his cold eyes, not having the desire to continue the conversation. Lu Jue had a tense expression. "Yes." The car turned around and drove away from her under the woman's gaze. Ning Qin's fingers on the ground clenched tightly, and her straight back collapsed at this moment. She lowered her head and her vision was blurry. Her dignity was once again trampled under his feet. Crushed. She pursed her pale lips in discomfort and slowly stood up from the ground. Looking at her empty hands, Ning Qin smiled weakly. She had no money or phone. She really did not learn her lesson every time. Looking at the distant road, Ning Qin looked back. The Nian residence looked even more magnificent under the sunlight. She turned around numbly and walked down the road. At the corner of the road, a black luxury car was parked there, making it difficult for anyone to notice. The woman's delicate figure moved slowly and with difficulty across the car. Behind her, a few untimely tails appeared. They were sneaky and annoying. In the car, under the dark shadows, the man's dark eyes were flickering with unpredictable emotions. Between his long fingers was an unlit cigarette. Lu Jue turned around and lit it for him. "Young master, do you want me to settle it?" White smoke rose slowly as Nian Lai frowned. Through the car window, the woman's figure was about to disappear, and her tail was following tightly. After a long time, bitterness entered his throat. In the rising white mist, the man finally ordered. "Follow her."